Racist police officer cuts black girl's hair. Her father shocks the entire police department. Welcome back to Meaningful Stories. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and start the story right now. The afternoon sun hung low, casting long, jagged shadows across the manicured lawns of the neighborhood, a quiet, pristine bubble where nothing ever seemed out of place. Karen Whitmore perched by her front window, a hawk in her own domain, her iced tea sweating in her grip as she peered out from behind the blinds. She wasn't nosy, not in her mind. At least, she was the silent sentinel, the keeper of order, her sharp eyes flicking up from her phone every few minutes to scan the street. Who came, who went, who belonged, and who didn't? It was her ritual, her unspoken duty. Then she saw it. A gray SUV creeping down the road, its tires crunching against the asphalt with a slow, deliberate menace. Her breath hitched as it turned into the driveway 3 doors down, the Johnson house. Abandoned for 6 months, its windows dark and hollow like the eyes of a ghost. No for sale sign had graced its yard in weeks. No whispers of a new owner had reached her ears. Karen's pulse quickened, a drumbeat of unease. Who was this? The driver's door swung open, and out stepped a black man, his frame cloaked in shadow for a fleeting moment before the sunlight caught him. Jeans, a navy sweater, no uniform, no clipboard, nothing to mark him as safe. As known, he moved with a calm that prickled her nerves. A predator's grace, like he owned the place. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line as he circled to the trunk, pulling out boxes, and strode toward the front door. Her fingers twitched over her phone, hovering like a loaded gun. Was he a realtor? A contractor? Her mind raced, clawing for an explanation, but the stillness of the empty house mocked her logic. Then it happened. He fished a key from his pocket, a gleaming, damning shard of metal, and slid it into the lock with a click that echoed in her skull. The door yielded, swallowing him whole as he stepped inside. Karen's breath exploded in a sharp gasp, her thumb slamming down on her phone screen, the 911 call springing to life before she could second-guess it. Her heart thundered, a wild animal trapped in her chest. This wasn't about race, she told herself, the lie bitter on her tongue. This was about safety. What if he was a squatter? A thief? The neighborhood was her sanctuary, and she'd be damned if some stranger tore it apart. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice crackled through, steady and cold. Karen's eyes stayed glued to the house, her words tumbling out in a rush. Yes, there's a suspicious man. He just walked into a vacant home on my street. I don't think he's supposed to be there. Her voice trembled with urgency, her free hand clutching the edge of the windowsill as if it could anchor her spiraling thoughts. Describe him, the dispatcher pressed. Karen swallowed, her throat tight. Black male, medium build, gray SUV in the driveway. He used a key to get in. The words felt like a confession, a crack in her resolve. A pause, heavy and electric. So he used a key? Yes, Karen snapped, her voice rising. But that house has been empty for months. I don't know if he's supposed to have it. Her chest heaved, the air thick with her own justification. She wasn't wrong. She couldn't be wrong. The dispatcher took her details, name, address, the ticking seconds stretching into eternity, before promising an officer would investigate. Karen hung up, her hands trembling as she sank back into her chair. The iced tea forgotten, satisfaction warred with a gnawing unease in her gut. She wasn't accusing him, not really. She was just being vigilant. A good neighbor, that's all. But as the distant wail of sirens pierced the afternoon stillness, rolling closer like a storm on the horizon, Karen couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just lit a fuse, and the explosion was coming. The sirens screamed closer, slicing through the suburban hush like a blade through silk, their red and blue lights pulsing against the Johnson house's faded siding. Karen's fingers dug into the armrest of her chair, her breath fogging the window as she pressed her face closer. Eyes wide and unblinking, the police cruiser screeched to a halt behind the gray SUV, its tires spitting gravel, and 2 officers emerged, shadows in uniform, hands hovering near their holsters like gunslingers in a standoff. The air crackled with anticipation, thick and heavy, as if the neighborhood itself held its breath. The front door creaked open, and there he was, the man, Marcus, stepping into the sunlight. his silhouette framed by the threshold like a figure from a nightmare. Confusion flickered across his face, his brows knitting together as the officers closed in, their voices low and clipped. Swallowed by the distance, Karen's heart slammed against her ribs, a frantic rhythm urging her to watch, to know. His hands rose slowly, palms up, a gesture of surrender, or explanation, as the officers flanked him. Their postures rigid with authority. She leaned forward, her nails biting into her palms. This was it. They'd see through him. They had to. But then, movement. Marcus reached into his back pocket. Slow and deliberate. And Karen's stomach lurched. A weapon? A lie? Her mind raced, teetering on the edge of panic, until he pulled out a sheaf of papers, crisp and white, and thrust them toward the nearer officer. The cop snatched them, his eyes darting across the pages. And Karen saw it, the shift. The officer's shoulders loosened, the tension bleeding from his stance as he nodded once. Sharp and final. The second cop tilted his head, listening, then stepped back, his hand falling away from his belt. Marcus gestured toward the house, calm as still water, and the first officer returned the papers with a curt dip of his chin. Karen's mouth went dry, her tongue a lead weight. No cuffs, no shouts. The officers turned, retreating to their cruiser with the casual stride of men who'd found nothing worth their time. The engine roared to life, and the car rolled away, leaving Marcus standing there, arms crossed, staring after them with a look that sent a shiver down her spine. Controlled, knowing, dangerous. Her iced tea slipped from her grasp, shattering on the floor in a spray of glass and amber liquid. But she barely noticed. This wasn't right. They were supposed to do something. She'd called them for a reason, hadn't she? Driven by a surge of defiance, Karen flung open her front door and stormed onto the porch, the cool air biting at her flushed skin. She feigned a trip to the mailbox, her steps deliberate, ears straining as she edged closer to the scene. The officers were at their car now, one climbing in while the other lingered, clapping Marcus on the shoulder, a pat of camaraderie that twisted her gut. She couldn't stand it any longer. "Excuse me," her voice cut through the quiet, sharp and brittle, as she waved a hand, marching across her lawn with the fury of a woman scorned. The graying officer turned, his buzz cut glinting in the fading light. "Ma'am?" Karen forced a smile, tight as a coiled spring. "What's going on? I'm the one who called. I saw this man enter that house. It's been vacant for months." Her words trembled with indignation, her arms folding like a shield. The officer sighed, glancing at Marcus before meeting her gaze. "Ma'am, this is Mr. Ellington. He's the new owner. Moved in today." His tone was flat, final, a gavel striking her protest dead. Karen blinked, heat prickling her skin as the world tilted beneath her feet. "What?" she croaked, her voice barely a whisper. Marcus exhaled, a sound laced with quiet fury. "Yeah, I live here." His eyes locked onto hers, dark and unyielding, cutting through her excuses like a blade. Karen's mouth opened, then snapped shut, her mind scrambling for footing. She gestured wildly at the house. But there was no moving truck. No one knew. Marcus's lips curled into a dry, bitter laugh. "Didn't realize I needed to send out invitations." The officer shifted, uncomfortable, but Marcus didn't flinch. "Mr. Ellington showed us his paperwork, title, mortgage, ID. It's all legit. No break-in, no problem." The cop's eyes narrowed slightly. A flicker of judgment. Just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. The word landed like a slap, and Karen's face burned as if branded. She turned to Marcus, clutching at her last shred of righteousness. "I was protecting the neighborhood. You had to see how it looked. You assumed I didn't belong." Marcus cut in, his voice low and lethal, finishing the thought she couldn't bear to voice. The air thickened, a suffocating weight pressing down on her. The officer watched, silent, as if waiting for her to crumble. She took a step back, her lips a tight line. But Marcus's gaze held her, steady, piercing, promising this wasn't over. And deep down, she knew she'd just stepped into a trap she couldn't escape. The night descended like a shroud, heavy and suffocating, wrapping Karen's house in a silence that gnawed at her nerves. She tossed in her bed, the sheets twisting around her like chains, her mind a relentless reel of Marcus's parting stare, those dark, unreadable eyes boring into her soul, whispering secrets she couldn't unhear. "You've been watching me, haven't you?" His words echoed, sharp as a blade's edge, slicing through her flimsy denials. Sleep eluded her, chased away by a creeping dread that coiled tighter with every tick of the clock. He knew, and that knowing was a weapon she couldn't wrest from his grasp. Morning broke with a cruel, gray light, seeping through her blinds as she stumbled to the kitchen, coffee trembling in her hands. She peeked out, a thief in her own home, her gaze darting toward Marcus's house. She expected him gone, off to work, out of sight, giving her a moment to breathe. But there he was, leaning against his SUV in the driveway, arms crossed, his silhouette a dark sentinel against the dawn. And then, he turned. His eyes locked onto hers, piercing the distance, pinning her like prey caught in a hunter's sights. Karen gasped, jerking back so fast the coffee sloshed over her fingers, scalding her skin. The sting was nothing compared to the ice flooding her veins. Had he been waiting for her? Her pulse hammered, a war drum in her chest, as she scrambled for control. Fine, if he wanted to play mind games, she'd outlast him. She wasn't some coward to be rattled by a stare. But then, footsteps, heavy, deliberate, crunching up her driveway. The doorbell shrieked through the house, a jolt of terror that froze her mid-breath. She stood rooted, her hand clutching the counter's edge, the seconds stretching into an eternity of dread. Another ring, insistent, mocking. She forced her legs to move, each step a battle, and cracked the door open just enough to face him, Marcus. Standing there, his presence a storm cloud rolling over her threshold. Morning, he said, his voice deceptively casual, a predator cloaked in calm. His phone rested against his hip, a loaded gun in plain sight. Thought I'd return the favor. You've been real interested in me. I figured I'd stop by and say hi. Karen's jaw tightened, her mask of composure slipping into place. I don't know what you're talking about, she snapped, the lie brittle on her tongue. Marcus's smile was a shard of ice, sharp and unforgiving. See, I've got cameras, not just the doorbell kind, full security system. Set them up before I even unpacked a box. Her stomach twisted, a sickening lurch, as he tapped his phone awake and turned it toward her. The screen flared to life. And there she was, Karen, caught in grainy, undeniable truth, pacing past his house. Day after day, her head craning toward his windows, slowing to a crawl as she stared. The timestamps glowed like accusations, morning, evening, dusk, proof of her obsession laid bare. Her breath hitched, a ragged gasp she couldn't hide. I was just walking. My usual route. The words tumbled out, desperate, flailing against the evidence. Marcus's head tilted, his gaze a scalpel dissecting her excuses. Right, 'cause most people take their usual walk past the same house. Same time, every single day. He let out a short, hollow breath, stepping closer, his shadow swallowing the light spilling from her doorway. I wasn't sure what your deal was at first. But then I watched the footage, really watched it. You weren't just curious. You were waiting for something. Karen's heart thudded, a frantic beast clawing at her ribs. That's ridiculous, she spat, but her voice wavered, a crack in her armor. Marcus didn't flinch. Maybe, but I dug deeper. This house sat empty for months. Yet somehow, folks around here knew it was spoken for. His eyes narrowed, pinning her in place. I was the only bidder, no competition. No counter-offers. Just me. Funny thing, though, my realtor mentioned later there was chatter. Neighborhood whispers. Someone else was supposed to move in. The air turned to lead, crushing her lungs. Karen's lips parted, but no sound came. Only the deafening roar of her own pulse. Marcus leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that chilled her to the bone. So tell me, Karen, who were you all waiting for? She slammed the door, the bang reverberating through the house like a gunshot. Her hands shaking as she stumbled back. Her kitchen counter became her lifeline, her knuckles white as she gripped it, gulping air in ragged bursts. He had footage, he had proof, and worse, he'd sniffed out the truth she'd buried. The secret the neighborhood had never dared speak aloud. That house wasn't meant for him. And now, Marcus wasn't just a threat, he was a reckoning, closing in with every step. And she was running out of places to hide. The afternoon sun bled into a bruised, ominous sky, casting the neighborhood in a pallor that mirrored the storm brewing in Karen's chest. She stood frozen in her kitchen, the blinds cracked just enough to glimpse Marcus's house, a silent taunt 3 doors down. His words from that morning still clawed at her mind. A venomous echo. Who were you all waiting for? She'd slammed the door on him. But the dread had seeped through the cracks, pooling around her like a rising tide. He wouldn't let this go, she knew it, and the air buzzed with the promise of something terrible. Then came the knock, soft, hesitant, a traitor's signal. Karen's pulse spiked as she yanked the door open, revealing Linda, her neighbor from across the street, clutching her phone like it was a live grenade. Her eyes were wide, flickering with unease, her voice a hushed tremor. "Did you see this?" Linda whispered, as if the walls themselves might betray them. Karen's brow furrowed, a knot tightening in her gut. "See what?" Linda hesitated, her fingers trembling as she turned the phone toward Karen. The screen flared to life. And there it was, a video. Marcus's damning masterpiece. Karen's breath snagged in her throat as the footage unspooled. Herself, captured in stark clarity, stalking past his house day after day. Her head swiveling, eyes prying, a predator in plain sight. The timestamps burned into the corners, morning walks, evening prowls, each frame a nail in her coffin. And then his voice cut through, calm but razor sharp. "This is what I saw before I even moved in. And the moment I step onto my own property, cops show up. I wasn't trespassing. I wasn't breaking in. I was just a black man moving into his own home." The video ended, but the silence roared, deafening and suffocating. Karen's hands clenched into fists, nails biting her palms as her world tilted. Where did he post this?" she rasped, her voice a ghost of itself. Linda's lips quivered. Facebook, Instagram, the neighborhood group. Her words cracked like brittle glass. "Karen, what is this? It's out of context." Karen snapped, her voice spiking with desperation. A cornered animal baring its teeth. "I was looking out for the neighborhood. If I saw something suspicious, I had every right." "He wasn't suspicious." Linda cut in, her tone soft but piercing. A blade slipped between ribs. "He was just moving in." Her eyes searched Karen's face, then dropped to the phone, as if it held the truth she couldn't voice. Karen's chest heaved, fury and fear colliding in a molten rush. "So now I'm the villain?" she spat. But Linda didn't answer, just stood there, her silence a judgment heavier than words. "Judy's already commented," Linda added, her voice barely a whisper. "She's trying to spin it." But she shook her head. A mourner at a funeral. "This isn't going away." The door slammed shut behind Linda's retreat, the sound a gunshot in the stillness. And Karen staggered back, her face ablaze with shame and rage. Marcus hadn't just exposed her, he'd ripped the mask off her carefully curated life, broadcasting her prejudice to the world. The neighborhood group chat, once her domain, would be buzzing now, a hive of whispers and pointed fingers. She grabbed her phone, fingers trembling as she opened the app. But the screen mocked her, her messages sank into the void. Unanswered, unseen, as threads erupted around her like wildfire. Judy's tepid, "Let's all stay calm," post was drowning in replies. Unacceptable. Who else knew? This looks bad. Karen's breath came in shallow bursts, the walls closing in as the truth sank its claws deep. Marcus had turned her weapon against her. The call to 911, her righteous shield, was now a noose tightening around her neck. She'd wanted him gone, but he'd struck first, and the blast radius was swallowing everything, her reputation, her allies, her sanctuary. Linda's haunted look lingered in her mind, a harbinger of the isolation to come. The neighborhood wasn't just watching anymore, they were judging. And Karen was no longer the sentinel. She was the prey, and this was only the beginning of the reckoning. The days that followed were a slow bleed, each hour draining the life from Karen's once impenetrable world. Her house, her fortress, became a cage, its walls pressing in. The silence a deafening roar that mocked her every breath. She hadn't left since Linda's visit. The memory of that trembling phone screen seared into her mind like a brand. Marcus's video. Her shame laid bare for all to see. The neighborhood's pulse had shifted. A predator turning on its own. And she felt it, the eyes behind curtains. The whispers slithering through the streets like venom. She was no longer the watcher. She was the watched. The grocery store was her first surrender. A desperate escape at dawn when the world still slept. The air was crisp, biting at her skin as she gripped her cart, its wheels rattling like a death knell through the empty aisles. But even here, sanctuary eluded her. Faces turned, quick, Furtive glances that stung like barbs. Bethany Moore, from 3 streets over, rounded a corner, her cart clashing with Karen's in a jolt that mirrored the tension in her eyes. "Oh, hey, Karen," Bethany stammered, her smile a brittle mask. Cracking at the edges, Karen waited, breath held, for the usual chatter, but Bethany's lips twitched, and after a suffocating pause, she fled down the aisle, leaving only the echo of her footsteps. Karen's grip tightened, knuckles whitening. She wasn't invisible, not yet, but she was a ghost, haunting a world that no longer wanted her. Back home, the neighborhood group chat was a battlefield, its silence a weapon aimed at her heart. Her messages, tentative pleas for normalcy, sank into the void, swallowed by a torrent of posts that danced around her name like vultures circling a corpse. She'd been erased, not with a ban but with a chilling, unspoken exile. The WA meeting loomed like a guillotine, and though every instinct screamed to hide, skipping it would be a confession of defeat. So she went, chin high, hands clasped in her lap like a prisoner awaiting judgment. As Judy droned through updates at the podium, her voice a thin veneer over the tension crackling in the room. Then Marcus rose. Karen's stomach plummeted, a stone sinking into dark waters, as his shadow stretched across the folding chairs. "Since I'm new here," he began, his voice smooth as polished steel, "I just want to understand how things work." Judy's smile tightened, a thread pulled too taut. "Of course," she chirped, "we're all about open communication." "Good to know," Marcus replied, his tone a velvet glove over a fist. He pulled out his phone, the device glinting like a drawn blade. "Because I'm curious. How does the WA handle it when a homeowner's harassed before they even unpack?" The room froze, a collective intake of breath as eyes darted, some to him, some to her. Judy's smile twitched. I'm not sure what you mean," she faltered, her voice a crumbling dam. Marcus's lips curved, a predator's grin. "I think you do." He tapped the screen, and the video flared to life. Karen's stalking silhouette, the timestamps, his calm indictment ringing through the speakers. Whispers erupted, a rustling storm, as coughs and shifting chairs filled the stunned silence. He pocketed the phone, his gaze sweeping the room like a searchlight. "So, what's the policy on that?" Judy cleared her throat, her eyes flicking to Karen, a traitor's glance. "I think we should take this offline," she stammered, but Marcus's smile widened, cold and unyielding. "Oh, I'm fine having it here. Unless it's too uncomfortable?" Murmurs swelled, agreement, unease, a tide turning against her. Karen's nails dug into her palms, her face a furnace of humiliation as the truth crystallized. Marcus wasn't just here to bury her. He was here to expose them, the neighbors who'd whispered, who'd hoped, who'd wanted him gone. And now, they scattered like rats from a sinking ship, leaving her alone on the wreckage. She stumbled home, the night air clawing at her skin, the weight of their abandonment a noose tightening with every step. For the first time, Karen wasn't the one casting out, she was the outcast, a pariah in the kingdom she'd built, and the blade of Marcus's retribution still hung over her, its shadow growing darker with every passing hour. The days bled into a haze of shadow and silence, Karen's world shrinking to the 4 walls that once crowned her queen of this pristine suburb. She'd always believed people like her, pillars of the community, guardians of order, were untouchable, shielded by their manicured lawns and WA bylaws. Gossip might flutter, glances might sting, but nothing could topple her throne. She'd been wrong. Now, the air itself turned against her, thick with the scent of betrayal, as the neighborhood she'd shaped twisted into a stranger's domain. The first blow landed like thunder, a phone call from her son, Andrew, his voice a jagged blade slicing through the line. "Mom, what the hell did you do?" he demanded, each word dripping with a fury she'd never heard from him. Karen sat bolt upright on her couch, the cushion swallowing her like quicksand. "What are you talking about?" she croaked, dread coiling in her gut. Andrew's laugh was a hollow, bitter shard. "A colleague called me today, someone I work with. He saw your video." Her stomach lurched, the room spinning as his words sank in. "It's everywhere. Mom, you called the cops on a guy for moving into his own house. And now my boss is asking questions. People in the break room are whispering about my mother like she's some racist cartoon." His voice cracked, raw and accusing. "I never thought you were that person, controlling. Sure, stubborn as hell. But this? Thanks for dragging me into it. Don't call me for a while. Okay? The line went dead. A guillotine's fall, leaving her staring at the phone, her chest hollowed out by a shame she couldn't name. The WA minutes arrived next. A sterile PDF that might as well have been her obituary. Her name, once a fixture, a badge of honor, was gone. Erased from the records like a stain scrubbed clean. No invitations, no mentions, just a void where she'd stood. Neighbors who once waved now averted their eyes. Their conversations a distant hum she couldn't pierce. The street felt alien, its tidy houses glaring at her with cold, unblinking windows. She was a specter, haunting her own life, and the weight of it crushed her breath by breath. Then came the killing stroke, her property value. The crown jewel of her legacy. She'd spent years sculpting this neighborhood's prestige, vetting buyers, ensuring the right people moved in. Now, Marcus had turned her weapon into a wrecking ball. His community outreach initiative, a quiet, deliberate counterstrike, caught the local media's eye. His story splashed across headlines. Newcomer overcomes exclusion in elite enclave. Reporters circled, their questions sharp and probing, peeling back the HOA's polished facade to reveal the whispers of exclusionary deals. Houses lingered on the market, unsold, their prices dipping like blood seeping from a wound. Karen had fought to keep everything the same, but she'd ignited a fire that consumed it all. One evening, she sat alone in her front yard, the dusk painting the sky in shades of bruise and ash. Her gaze drifted to Marcus's house, alive with light and laughter as he and his sister hauled groceries inside. Their voices a melody of triumph. He paused, glancing her way, and their eyes locked, a fleeting, electric collision across the divide. She braced for a smirk, a gloat, but he offered only a slow, deliberate nod, not kindness, not cruelty, but a quiet, unshakable acknowledgement. She was the vanquished, and he was the victor standing on the ashes of her reign. Karen looked away first, her throat tightening as the truth sank deep. She'd lost everything, not just her place, but her illusion of righteousness. And somewhere in the ruins, she knew she'd earned this fall. The night swallowed her house, the stars indifferent overhead, and a final whisper lingered in the dark. Prejudice could hide behind concern, behind tradition, behind a neighbor's watchful eye, but the truth was a relentless hunter. And it had found her at last. Thank you for accompanying us in today's story. See you again in the next videos. Hello and see you again.